Okay, this lesson is going to be on cosine functions, and we're just going to look at period change and horizontal shifting. Okay, period change and horizontal shifting. So I want to remind you about your equation and just remind you what we use for each thing. So the C value deals with the period. Okay. So we take our original period of 2 pi, which is one wave, one rotation, and we divide it by whatever number is right in front of theta. Okay, so that's our C value. And then to find out what our tick marks are going to be named or how far apart they are, we're going to take that new period and divide it by 4. All right, the other thing we're going to look at is the horizontal shift. And whatever's in the parentheses is going to deal with the horizontal shift. So we're going to take the parentheses, put it equal to 0, and see how far we moved. All right. So we're going to try that with a couple of problems here. All right. The first one's going to have a period change of 1/2. So to find our new period, we take 2 pi and divide it by the 1/2. Because I'm dividing by a fraction, I'm going to keep the top, change the multiplication, and turn the bottom upside down. So that gives me a new period of 4 pi. So my wave has to fit within 4 pi. To find the interval, or how far apart each tick mark is, we take that period and divide it into 4 pieces. So each mark that we put on the graph is pi apart from each other. Okay? And we want 4 of them. So 2 pi, 3 pi, 4 pi. A cosine wave starts at 1, 0, 1, and moves down to the lowest point of -1, 0, and then goes back up. So a cosine wave looks like this. Now remember, a sine wave went this way. A cosine wave takes the sine wave and moves it 90 degrees. So that high point is on the y-axis. Okay? So I could come down with this, and there's a sine wave. Okay? Alright. So we want to be able to name all the parts. Our amplitude, remember, is right in front of the function. Still 1. We didn't do any other kind of translations. Our maximum amount is +1, and our minimum is -1. That gives us our range, -1 to 1. Domain is all real numbers for every one of them. And then your x-intercepts, if you happen to cross x, we want to know what that is if it's on one of our critical points. So we crossed x at pi and 3 pi. Okay? So let's try another one. So this particular graph, it had a period change of pi. Okay? So we take our original 2 pi and divide it by c. That gives us a period of 2. If we take our new period and divide it into 4 parts, each tick mark is 1/2 apart from each other. So the first tick mark from 0 is 1/2, then add a 1/2, that's 1. Add another 1/2, that's 3/2. Add another 1/2, that's 2. And remember, cosine starts at 1, comes down, and back up. Okay? So that's our cosine wave. All right. So let's look at this one where we have a period change and we also have a vertical shift. Okay? So first of all, you find out the information. We have 2 pi divided by c, which is pi. That gives us a period of 2. So we take our new period and divide it by 4. So each mark is 1/2 away. So 1/2, 1, 3/2, 2. Now, our amplitude is 1. Okay? So I'm just going to make a dotted graph for my original graph with this new period. Okay? The only other thing I have to deal with is to move up 2. So each point is going to move up 2. Okay? So this first point's going to go up 2 points. And if this goes up 2 points, each one of them is going to go up 2 points. And all that happened was that we vertically shifted our graph up 2. Okay? We did change the intervals as well. So our max is now 3. Our minimum is now +1. So that changes our range from 1 to 3. Okay? We did not cross X. We went away from the x-axis, and our domain is all real numbers. Okay? Now, let's talk about a horizontal shift. Okay? A horizontal shift occurs when we have something in the parentheses other than the theta, okay, or the c. So you see how this is added to the angle. That means we moved to a new angle. We weren't at 30 degrees. We're 30 degrees plus pi, okay? So we've got to do our horizontal shifts first, but we want to find out what our intervals are, okay? So our period is 2 pi. We do not have a c value, so that's going to remain 2 pi. And our intervals, we're going to divide 2 pi by 4. So that gives us intervals of pi over 2. Now, for the horizontal shift, you need to take what is in the parentheses, it's this pi, x plus pi, and put it equal to 0 and solve it. Now we want to solve it for x, so we're going to move that pi over by subtracting it. And so our angle shift, or our horizontal shift, is left, because it's negative, pi. Now, we need to think before we graph, okay? Because I've got to move a whole pi to the left, where my graph typically starts at 0, 1. I now have to shift it to the left. It's going to start somewhere else. Okay, so let's look at that. Our intervals are 1/2. So we're going to go over a half and over another half. So since I have to move to the left pi, I need to find out where that is, and it's here. I've got an interval at 1/2. I'm going to have an interval at 0, because if I add a half, that's what I'm going to get. Then another one at pi over 2. Add another pi over 2, and I get pi. So notice I still have my 5 marks, like before, my 4 sections. This time my graph is going to start here, because I have to shift to the left pi. Then I'm going to go down, and I'm going to come back up. So there's my graph with a horizontal shift to the left pi. Now my amplitude didn't change, it was still 1, okay? My maximum and minimum did not change. Max is still 1, minimum is still -1. So that means my range did not change, okay? My domain is going to remain all real numbers. My intercepts did change, because I shifted. I have an intercept at -pi over 2 and +pi over 2. Okay? Let's try another one. All right? This one's a little bit more complex. Got a little bit more going on in the parentheses. Okay? So, let's first take the period. Normally it's 2 pi, but we have a c value, and that's a 3. Okay? So my new period is 2 pi over 3. We want to take that 2 pi over 3 and divide it by 4. So we're going to keep the top, change to multiplication, and we're going to turn this upside down and multiply by 1 over 4. Okay, so let's look. We've got 2 pi over 12, which is pi over 6. All right, so each tick mark that we draw is going to be pi over 6 apart from each other. All right, our amplitude did not change. There's nothing in front of this, so it's understood 1. We do have a horizontal shift. So over here on the side, I'm going to take that parentheses and I'm going to put it equal to 0. Now let's solve. We're going to subtract the pi over 2. It gives us 3x equals negative pi over 2. I'm going to divide by 3, but instead of dividing by 3, we're just going to multiply by 1/3, okay? So if we multiply by 1/3, we get negative pi over 6. So we went left because it's negative pi over 6. Now, that's really good because our intervals are pi over 6. So I've just got to make one mark over here on the left so that I went pi over 6 to the left from my first tick mark of 0, okay? So 0 is going to be another mark, pi over 6, 2 pi over 6, which reduces to 1/3, and then 3 pi over 6, which reduces to 1/2. Okay, now we got to make sure we're right. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, and 4, 6 reduces to 2/3. Okay, so we've got our period is going to fit within this 2/3 pi. Our amplitude is 1, so we're just going to keep it there. We start high, go low, and come back up. Okay, our max is still 1, min is still -1, so our range didn't change. Domain did not change. And our intercepts are now at 0 and pi over 3. Okay, because we did shift and that changed our intervals or our intercepts. Okay, I want to do one more just to make sure we're good. Let's do this one. Okay, we're gonna do this one right here. All right, we're gonna name our period. I know I don't have a graph here, but we're gonna work with it. Our period is 2 pi divided by the c. The c is a 2, so our period is pi. That means our intervals are pi over 4. Okay, now this one's going to be tricky, so you got to pay attention. Our amplitude did not change. All right, so let's look. We're going to take this parentheses here, x plus pi over 3, put it equal to 0, and solve. So we're going to shift left. We're going to go left because it's negative pi over 3. All right, now this is the tricky part. We're moving pi over 3, but our intervals are pi over 4. So what we want to do is we want to say negative 1/3 plus 1/4. Because we want to take where we're moving to and we want to add an interval to see if I need another tick mark. And I do. My first tick mark is how I moved, left pi over 3. If I add the interval of 1/4, I get negative pi over 12. Then we're going to add 1/4 to that. That gives us pi over 6. Then I'm going to add 1/4 to that. And that gives us 5 over 12, 5 pi over 12. I'm going to run out of time and then add 1/4 to that. And we get 2 pi over 3. All right, and then you're just going to graph.